Hey, it's Brain Muffin back with some nerd stuff. And as we are starting to do more and more videos, and I do have some videos coming up where we'll actually be doing some coding. That'll be awesome. So ASP.NET Core is becoming kind of a hot item, and I've been wanting to learn more and more about that. And so we have from Andrew Locke, a .NET Escapades. You have to subscribe to his blog. So we'll see. So this one caught my eye the other day. So delaying strongly typed options configuration using post configure in ASP.NET Core. It is a mouthful of a title. Excuse me. And I know what strongly typed options are, but not through configuration. It sounds very interesting because right now in .NET, quite often people use var for stuff, and it's really shorthand more than anything because the return, let's say you say var, some variable equals, and there's a method call or something, or a declaration of something where it actually is more concrete. That is still strongly typed. You can't then assign that var to something completely different. So you can't say var equals, something equals, and then it's a string, and then you later assign it an integer. So it's still strongly typed. It's just shorthand, really, more than anything. And I'm very mixed emotions about that. But this is interesting. So let's read through this article. In this post, I describe a scenario in which a library author wants to use the options pattern. Again, more and more patterns. Every time I turn around, it's like there must be 1,000 patterns by now and 10,000 anti-patterns. Configure their library and enforce some default values constraints. I describe the difficulties in trying to achieve this through the standard configure T. So we have templating. Method for strongly typed options include the concept of post configuration as a so after configuration. So, too long, didn't read. If you need to ensure a configuration action for a strongly typed setting instance returns after all other configuration actions, you can use the post configuration template method. Actions registered using this method are executed in the order they are registered, but after all other configuration actions have been applied. So we're using this as essentially a delegate to register and say, hey, I'm interested after configuration is done, using the options library as author. The options pattern is the standard way to add strongly typed settings to ASP.NET Core applications by binding POCO objects to a configuration object constraint of key value pairs. That's interesting because this was one of the things that drove me nuts about .NET when you were doing introspection and reflection. Namespace, the version of stuff was in the namespace path, and it was annoying, especially coming from Java where it was just the package names. I don't know why you had when you were registering your DLLs and the paths made, I don't know why Microsoft did it that way. This is how SharePoint's made and everything else, but it is annoying when you're trying to do that. At least it's been years since I've done that stuff. Basically, once I learned that there were other frameworks that were already doing it, I just kind of flushed all that knowledge. But introspection reflection is a really neat thing to do. Maybe I'll do some videos on it. ASP.NET Core strongly typed settings are configured for your application in startup.configuration services, typically by calling blah 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 to configure a strongly typed object. My settings, and you can use multiple configuration steps to configure a single my settings instance, with each step corresponds to a configure my step invocation in order that the order are made in order which that basically it's creating a list. When you register, it's just a list and just goes down the list, bam bam bam, maybe a linked list, and so void configure services, I service collection services. Okay, cool. As a library author, this can be both useful and a challenge. On the positive side, if you use options pattern, again, this options pattern, it'd be nice to have a link because I don't know what the options pattern is. Like I said, I think everybody just invents their own patterns and say, oh, this is a pattern, I'm going to call it my pattern 1, my pattern 2. Your library will have a familiar and extensible mechanism for configuring your what? Okay. On the end, you lose some control over when and how your library is configured. Okay, because it happens before, and it's not the last thing done, so it can be undone or overridden, I think is what he's getting at. An example library using options. Let's explore this a little. Imagine you have a service that sends WhatsApp message to users. You have a hosted API service that users can register with, which also open source. Okay, and so you also create a simple .NET library. I don't want to go through this in huge detail. This will be a 40-minute video, and that would be just incredibly boring. You also created a simple .NET standard library, which users can use to call at the heart of the library. So I have WhatsApp service. Okay, so we have an interface. Send is implemented as WhatsApp service. Not shown in the number of. So we have some things that are done, things that come out of constraints. Or constants, global variables. Okay, so these aren't really important. What's more important is that there is a specific rule you need to enforce here when the API URL is set to constants.default hosted in the region must be set to default hosted region. So I guess that's what okay, there we go. So there we go. These have to be set, and they have to be set before any of this other stuff, right? Oh, there's constants. So this has to go, and then that has to go. By default, the WhatsApp set instance will have the correct values for the hosted service, but the user is free to update the values to point to another API if they wish, because they're public. And these are getters and setters. These, see, again, so they're whining here that they have broken encapsulation with their public get and set. And yeah, these can be overridden at any time, even if you wanted to enforce a particular thing about them. And I don't see with posts, well, let's see, because that would mean anytime I could change those. Oh, well, I guess once they're stored, they're stored. By default, so this will have the correct values. Okay. To help the user add your library to your application, you created a couple of extension methods that they call in configuration services. Okay. So we have the WhatsApp and, WhatsApp service. So it takes an interface and an instance and particular class like service collection. Okay, service add options, add singleton. Singleton pattern. No, that's awesome. The extension method registers all the required services with the DI container to add the add library. So that's our library. The question is, how do we ensure that if the user uses default hosted, the region is always set? So I'm going to leave aside the whole question of whether strongly typed options are the right place to enforce these sorts of content, as well as the fact that API URLs definitely shouldn't be hard-coded as constants. Yeah, because that's the whole point is the configuration. But again, this is a simplicity for example only. Don't do it this way. Do it in an XML file or something else. As the library author, we know that we need to add a configuration action, or a lot of these you don't read an XML file. It comes out of what's the word I'm looking at? Container-based constraints that the container that this runs in provides those values. So the way the container is configured then provides in different so that different environments and all that other stuff. I know that now I'm getting completely sidetracked. So we have WhatsApp extensions, and we have add singleton, and we have for WhatsApp options, and we're going to define a lambda for options. If a pair of constraints, then set the region. Okay. Unfortunately, this approach isn't very robust. That's right. And it says in several previous posts, configuration actions applied to a strongly typed setting instance in the same order they are added. This means if the user calls after they call add WhatsApp, they will overwrite any changes enforced by the extension. Yeah, and again, part of the problem is breaking encapsulation here first. So iService client services, WhatsApp configure, and they will override any changes. So the highlights of one of the fundamental difficulties of working with a DI container, where the order things are added to the container matters, and library author are fundamentally not in control of that process. That's correct. Family extension methods, configuring strongly type with a post. Okay, so now we're going to go post. I thought this said it was in the same order, but okay, extension method. With one exception, configuring is after all actions are executed. So when configuring a strongly type setting object, the options framework will add standard. Okay, so this provides a nice, simple solution to our scenario. We can add WhatsApp extension methods to use post, and then we can be sure that we'll run after any standard configuration actions. But I don't see how that can still, I don't understand how that can't override something. Because if I have more than one of these and I do it again, because it's the same stuff, but we're doing post. We're doing post configuration, because it's not just because you add it here. I mean, it runs after other things, but not necessarily last. Now users can place their call to configure WhatsApp anywhere in configure service, and it's fine. That's a lot easier than relying on users to read your document saying you must call, before calling add WhatsApp. One of the first thoughts I had when discovering this method is, what if I need ended users? What if the end user uses post too? Okay, so here's my question. Well, in that situation, there's not a lot you can do about it. But also that's fine. The idea here is to try and enforce certain constraints in normal circumstances. But what's normal? What is normal? What are normal circumstances? Post configuration options for named options. Method doesn't support the default options instances. It also works with named. It doesn't just. It would help if I actually read what was there. So we have configure the name and options and post. That's good. This is the post version of. That's good. Only the last point is worth watching out for. So I'll reiterate this: there is no post version of iConfigurations options interface. The post iPost configuration is shown has named and uses named instances. Oh, okay. Int where? Okay, yeah, we're going to have int options is class. What? Oh, is it class? Okay, so it cannot take interfaces. That's interesting. This means if you're using named options and just want to implement an interface that's equivalent to the iConfigurations option interface, you should look for the special options.default name value, that is string.empty. So your example, imagine here the following implementation of iConfiguration configures default. This is really thick now. It's going to take a little bit of time to, okay, so my settings, okay, read only. Yeah, I hate this underline thing. This is what they've actually made that a real thing, and it's just, to me, it's just dumb. If you want to, it's like a bow down back to old, mid 90s C++ to me. It's just stupid. You want to create a post configuration version that only configures the default options. You should use these pieces of calculator and post configuration, and you can add this. So anyway, now I can't. I can't scroll down to the summary, so we're going to have to stop and reconfigure. This is dumb. Okay, this is my fault. All right, hold on a second. All right, so here we have, hopefully I did this right. So I know that this will be edited together and people, what are we doing? So read-only calculator, service options, and do complex calculation, post configuration, because it has to be it's a strongly typed, and you can add this to your post configuration class to your DI container using add single services. Okay, my settings, configure my settings options, which is a class of iPost configuration options settings. Okay, good. In summary, in this post I showed you can use post configuration now to configure strongly typed options that are after all the standard config T actions have run. This is, T being whatever class you want to be or interface. So apparently, if I read this all correctly, this can be an interface, but this cannot. That's odd. This is useful as a library author, allows you to do things like configure default values only if the user hasn't configured options, or to enforce constraints. An application user will generally shouldn't need to use post configure as you already control the order in which, and which is what he says. And that was one of my questions. Well, gee, and so nothing prevents that. But again, it's one of those best practices as opposed to an enforceable rule. So now down here, and now I can scroll all the way back to the top, and no, I can't. So anyway, there are no comments on this article, and maybe I'll add in and say, hey man, I like this article so enough that I actually did a read. I can't wait to absorb this more. This is definitely one I'm going to bookmark and come back to. I'm really starting to do a little bit more with core. I got some stuff going with the Traveler basic rules that I gotta start doing some videos on, but it's just part of the problem is just, I got 10 minutes to write some code and then that's it. And I don't get to it for a week or a month. And that's my own fault. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. And what do you think of this concept? I understand, what we're trying to do here. It seems a little bit like a kludge to enforce it this way, but again, it basically lets the user do all the configurations that they need. If they miss something that's important, you can default it to something. And you can also specify in your library definition documentation, it says, here's the settings you need, here's the defaults for the settings, and then again, you don't have to worry about things being nuked, but because maybe someone forgets or they unset something and you send it back. That would be interesting. So, all right. Thanks you, Andrew, for your article and definitely bookmarking. And I'm definitely going to make a comment later. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Please share these videos and from Nerd Corner, and I appreciate you. See ya. Bye.